The mic is live. Good evening. Good evening. This is the third or fourth lecture in our 302 lecture series. Is there anyone in the audience who's not enrolled in Studio 302? Excellent. Haley and Peter, thank you very much for being here. Lorenzo, Natalie. This is our surrogate spring lecture series, or the talks that are being delivered in our various studios. IBDS has a few talks. We've got a few talks in 302. Actually, it's rich with talks. So those of you who are not in the studio, Peter and Haley, please encourage your friends to participate in the next one. Tonight, we're going to hear from David Haresign and Eduardo Frontera. They're from Bonstra Haresign partnership. David's a founding partner. Eduardo is an associate. I'm going to read, I apologize, but I'm going to read their very short bios. David, let's see, here we go. David is a Washington, D.C. based practice. They've produced nearly 400 projects. Yes, that's 400 projects. How many years? Decades? 25 years. Let's do the math. Across a broad spectrum of building types and scales. His projects have earned recognition with more than, this is also a big number, 165 national, regional, and local design awards. This is impressive. People rarely do that. They've been featured in publications such as Urban Land, Residential Architect, Architecture DC, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. David's career reflects a dual commitment to design excellence and firm leadership, complemented by service as a leader and trustee of professional, industry, cultural, and academic organizations. If you participate in any professional organizations around town, you will bump into David. Eduardo is a project coordinator. He's been there for more than 10 years after graduating with a Master of Architecture from SCAD. He also earned a Bachelor of Science in Architecture from our school. He's designed and implemented renovations, historic preservation, and multifamily projects. He's versed in working with historical approval processes. These are not trivial. This is really where the rubber meets the road in practice, is jumping all the hurdles to get approval to build things. Feasibility studies, the crucial evidence that architects create to prove to their clients that the project is possible, and urban planning and architectural review boards. Additionally, Eduardo has established himself as a vital member of the operations team and the firm's go-to BIM expert. This, as you know, is a critical component of professional practice today, so every firm needs an expert. He's also instrumental in the development and application of firm-wide BIM standards. It's the wild, wild west if you don't have standards. And the most amazing software and the most amazing tools will get you nowhere if you don't have standards. So without further ado, David and Eduardo, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark. I hope one thing you take away from that conversation is that there are a lot of people involved in making architecture. And there's a lot of areas of specialty. In our firm, we try to be generalists. So we don't have designers. We don't have people who only do construction administration. They do it all. And, Eduardo is quietly, not a loud guy, calls a lot of attention to himself, been extremely critical in terms of the projects that we do. We're going to look at 4 case studies tonight, and Eduardo's been involved at some phase in all 4 of those projects, and he's going to do most of the talking about that. So the agenda tonight, I'll talk a little bit about BHA. We'll talk about 4 case studies. We'll talk about trends in multifamily housing. And then we're going to give everyone some multifamily design guides and rules of thumb with some drawings. So this lecture the slideshow will be posted in Brightspace, Whitespace, Guidespace, whatever. So the lecture will be posted there. And again, there are drawings. I also encourage you to look at our website. So our website is extremely rich. It has not only the lots of great photographs that we pay a ton of money for, but also drawings at the end of it that explain the big ideas of the project and also nuance about plan, section, elevation, and sometimes modeling, axonometric and other modeling. So the firm is design first. We're all about design. So our projects, as Mark mentioned, get a lot of recognition in the industry, a very high quotient. We're experts in executing contemporary architecture, oftentimes in historic context. We do restoration work as well. I wouldn't say we're preservationists per se. We usually bring in an expert to help with that. But we work on historic buildings and have great appreciation for them. We work predominantly in the Washington, D.C. region, mostly inside the Beltway. We've designed over 300 projects, 350 now or so as my guess, projects that include multifamily housing, and most of them get built. So we do feasibility studies, which often tell a client whether or not they want to go forward with the project. And, sometimes the best projects that you don't do, that you don't get are the ones that never go forward. So we don't like those very much, but we're a high build quotient firm. We currently have 25 people. We are down from 35 because of the market conditions and the interest rates and other things. You have to adjust to that. We participate with the community. So we listen carefully to what the community is talking about, what's important to them as we go through entitlements. Entitlements mean approvals in the public sector. We have a 100% approval rate. All right. We have never lost. So we eliminate risk for our clients. They understand that when they come to us, they're getting expert opinion and that we will help guide them through to a successful conclusion. And but my partner, Bill Bonstra, and I participate in the projects, participate oftentimes leading in the beginning during the design phases, but we're involved in it all the way through with great team members like Eduardo and other senior team members. There are two associate partners with the firm, Jack Devilbis, a graduate of undergrad and grad here, and John Edwards, who went to the University of Virginia, go Hoos, and the University of Maryland, and Bill's happy about that. We design and implement housing for all. Keep going. Firm profile, you've already heard lots of this. Strong regional recognition, full service architecture only. We team with other engineering firms, landscape architects. We do some of our own interior design work, but oftentimes team with another firm. 31 is down to 22. Sorry, 18 architects. We use computer technology, but if you can't draw by hand, you can't work with our firm. So you have to be able to sketch. The sketchbook program that we saw a couple of weeks ago is pretty amazing in terms of the quality of hand sketching that comes out of the program here. And our studio over here in 302, we're doing a lot of hand sketching and pleased to see our students being able to do that. So next one. We do lots of different project types. Again, entitlement specialist. Our work is driven by sustainable design ideas. We'll hear more about that from Carl Elefante on Friday with another lecture. Next slide. So these are the primary project areas that we focus on. Creating place or master planning, multifamily housing. We occasionally do a single family house or two. Next slide. Lots of historic architecture and transforming buildings and adaptive reuse. We are really good at taking office buildings, churches, schools, other buildings that have had other uses and making them into residential projects in particular. And then we do some commercial work. That's been my career up until Bill and I got together, was commercial office buildings, a little bit of institutional work. So we did the headquarters tower designed the headquarters tower at Capital One at Tyson's Corner that you all can see. That's the building in the middle on the left-hand side. And then we do shop and retail work also, again, as part of mixed use, but also as a separate design exercise. Next slide. And we have worked in the neighborhood. We have an affordable housing project that was done next to the McDonald's at Fourth and Rhode Island. A little project back on Varnum Street. We did on 4th Street. So 4th and Rhode Island for affordable housing project in the upper left. The Hecker House, which is essentially a missionary house for the Paulists, right down on 4th Street down here as part of a redevelopment of a large site. And then One Hawaii is just finished. Took scout photos yesterday, but that's down at Hawaii and North Capitol Street next to a couple of cemeteries. So we're going to go through some projects now that are 3 that are built, 1 unbuilt, and talk a little bit about the process that we've gone through on these projects. These are the case studies that will give you an idea of what it's like to work on a project from kind of beginning to end, big idea, sketches, all the way through completed work. Good.
So this is the Allium Place, or how we used to call it, Randolph Road. It's a new redevelopment, multifamily, multi-building, affordable project that sits on a 6-acre site in Montgomery County. The site is kind of on a crossroad of various different density types. You can sort of see it in that aerial image. It has 195 affordable units, which 24 of those units are affordable condos, and 85 of those units are 3 to 4 bedroom units, which are really hard to find in that market. Additionally, the site hosts 3 single-family homes done by Habitat for Humanity.
So this site is the largest completed affordable housing complex in Montgomery County to date. There are several that are lined up behind it that are going to be larger, but this was the county executive's interest to provide what he called missing middle housing. So it's really affordable, so it's hard to call it missing middle, except there's a variety of unit types or homes for people, including for sale homes and for sale condominiums in a market like Montgomery County is very hard to find. Go ahead.
The county also adopted it as its kind of basic base of design for affordable housing. So now it's become this kind of gold standard that any new affordable housing project should kind of try to meet and follow. As David said, it's kind of filling in the missing middle, not only at the housing level, but on the site level. So I mentioned before, there's some low density to the west, to the north and east, to the east, and then to the north and west, there's some higher density projects. The site itself was pretty barren. It hosted a community center that is no longer there.
So owned by the county. This was a developer competition, not a design competition. So our developer, who we've been working with since 2005, came to us and said, will you be part of our team? Actually paid us a little bit of money, not, full fair fee, but a reasonable fee to participate with them to win this project. So their idea was not to overdo the architecture during this initial stage, but basically do box mass and yield studies. We looked at several alternatives, including a long bar building that you see in the kind of upper, if you can point to that, long bar building closer to the higher density. Randolph Road has a middle-sized multifamily building. And then we looked at both townhouses and these what are called fourplex units. They are three-story buildings. They do not have an elevator. They have 4 units per floor. So, and a single stair.
The 6 buildings in the middle also help deal with topography as it was significant. You sort of see that here in that small diagram elevation, as well as in this photo. That also became a huge part of the site and the central part of it as a organizational means to the site. So as David said, the larger building to the west along Randolph Road, the medium-sized building, and then kind of framing this central gathering space, public space within that community are the 6 smaller buildings that step down as you go down the grade as well.
So I think for you as students, it's important for you to see that the diagrams we're asking you to make right now that you have made for the first 3 exercises in our studio are not radically different than the diagrams that we make as professionals. So, you know, the skills you learn here now will apply to your professional career.
So these are more specific about the buildings. This is building 1 and building 2, 3. Yes. So again, kind of smaller buildings and the mix of units that the project offered, which again was kind of unheard of with the 3 to 4 bedrooms at a project of this scope. These are a zoomed in view of those smaller buildings, that pinwheel to allow private views all the way around. So each unit kind of has a privacy as the building rotates. As I mentioned, again, this kind of helped step down through the site.
So in addition to us, we had a landscape architect, Parker Rodriguez, who worked with us to help develop this. There's 13 feet of fall across from the lower right-hand corner of this courtyard between the buildings to the upper part where we go into the face of building 1.
For those that joined a few weeks ago, these are single stair buildings, essentially. 4 units per floor, 3 stories, no elevator. Again, a close-up to that 4-bedroom unit, again, unheard of for this type of project.
So, yeah, so in a client of ours who specializes in retail asked us to look at a site that they acquired in Williamsburg, Virginia. So what do you guys think about when you think about Williamsburg? Traditional federal architecture, very calm. This is immediately adjacent to the historic campus and had to go through the historic review process. So it was very interesting. So go ahead.
So another multi-building complex. In this case, it was multifamily, but with a focus on students. Again, as David said, very close to the College of William and Mary. It sits kind of at a gateway site into Williamsburg, Virginia, colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. It was an existing strip mall that we'll talk a little bit about later. So as we said, this is colonial Williamsburg down here, the College of William and Mary, and this gateway, if you've ever been to Williamsburg, there's this kind of long road full of commercial, kind of broken commercial spaces. Our site sits on the crossroad of Monticello and Richmond Road, which is key as you enter into the kind of colonial district historic area.
So there were 6 strip mall shopping centers on Richmond Highway. 6. They were 30 to 40% occupied. They were way overbuilt in terms of their retail. And, you know, I was talking to a couple students today about how much retail to put into their buildings and discouraging them from overdoing it. So, you know, everybody's knee-jerk response is, I'm going to put retail on the first floor of my building. Well, you better have enough residents to support it. And this Richmond Highway district area is proof positive that you know there's a need for high density residential to support retail. So our client was able to pick up this particular site for pennies on the dollar because it was 35% occupied, including a grocery store, which we couldn't touch. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's got to be balanced. Keep going.
So our goals were to generate density, connect street grids that were broken because of the existing strip mall, understanding the city requests for redevelopment and their contemporary design. So to our kind of surprise in a way, through a process of different entitlements and presentations to the city, they actually asked us to propose something more on the contemporary side. As you see in the screen, these photos are of the existing context. Particularly, I would focus on the colors as we now go through the project. We were able to kind of look at that and bring it into the project. As we mentioned, the existing site was a kind of low density strip mall with 6 existing buildings, 3 of which the project was going to keep, and 3 of which were going to be torn down to be replaced with higher density multifamily buildings.
But as we were developing the project, we wanted to give our client a view of what it could be if it were totally redeveloped. So we did studies on the lower left-hand side, proposed phase 3, of what it might look like. So you can see that there's a grid of streets. This ties into a grid that's surrounding the site in adjacent areas. In the event that the client ever got rid of some of the retail. You can see on the site plan to the right that the buildings that are off angle are the 3 building blocks that remained, a grocery store, a tag-on retail space, an Ace hardware store, I think, and then another block building. So we took about half the site and redeveloped it for mixed use, student housing, and residential. Idea diagram, site diagram that talks about important entry corners and where the primary axes were occurring. So next slide.
So as we kind of focus on the buildings, we knew that retail line buildings was essential to, again, create density and to build up that retail along Richmond Road, which was empty at the moment. And so the ground level wanted to have a continuity, but above we wanted to break it to create a rhythm and some scale for the pedestrians, since most of these buildings were really long bar buildings.
It was originally designed for prefabrication, and it was going to have prefabricated units that were put on top of the retail base. When they got into the finance of it, they found out that they were paying too much money up front for things that were stored off-site as pre-made, and they couldn't come to an agreement with their lenders in terms of how to deal with that. So it went back to conventional construction.
So that the new retail line buildings create an activated street front with sidewalks that are more pedestrian centric, as before it was more car centric with the kind of strip mall condition. There were also additional bike lanes and walkable sidewalks that were added. Yeah. Anything else?
No, again, framing elements, framing the primary entrance into the site and retail street. Good.
There was also we needed to find a way to gain light into some of the bedrooms, some of the bathrooms that were more inboard into the building. So again, in looking to create rhythm and scale at the street side, we generated some deep light wells that allowed for natural light and airflow. And then emphasizing corners as well. So primary corners where key intersections happen, allowed for creating placemaking within the site, since it was four buildings that carried through a very kind of brotherly language between them. Connection was also very important. So all the buildings connect through their ground floor entryways. As you can see here, this is the primary building for the residents, where it hosts amenity spaces as well as centralized services like the leasing office, the mailroom, etc. So it was important for a connection to happen between the buildings as well. And then in looking to solve an issue within the city of Williamsburg where you can't have more than one tenant under a lease under the same roof, the units were devised to provide flexibility with that. So 1 to 4 bedroom units were provided with a focus on the bed count. So each room is able to be rented out regardless of who else lives in that unit. Again, the light wells that help bring in some of the light into these deeper inset buildings. And just to focus on the single family home renters restriction that the city had, this project's thought to fix that. Amenity space, the amenity spaces were kind of focused on the residential student life. So things like library, gym, study rooms, lounge areas, movie rooms, things that could serve the people that were going to live there was the main focus of the spaces.
So an amusing thing about this project, it was geared towards students, right? So this was all about housing students. About 10% or so of the units that are rented to retirees who didn't want to leave Williamsburg. They sold their houses and they moved in with the students because of the amenities and the other things. And then there's about another 10% or so that are rented to students who have recently graduated, who are still want to live in Williamsburg and take advantage of the proximity to the university and the amenities that are in this complex. So go ahead.
That's just the last view.
Okay. So this is a market rate project that is in Washington, D.C. It's a high-rise building. It's type 1 construction. It was the first piece of a block that is being redeveloped right near the ballpark. So it's down South Capitol Street. It's on L Street. It was a taxi repair garage before, 60 feet wide. So there is a building built adjacent to it after ours was complete that actually adopts or has accidentally some of the same language. So it looks like, you know, a full building, full block width facade on L Street.
So it sits on a lot that's 60 foot wide. If you're in 302, you know kind of what that means with multifamily buildings. But it's also exposed on 3 sides. So L Street, and then there's a side alley and a back alley as well. So yield study is something we do constantly. for our clients, and we try to meet their expectation, their unit count. So this is just an example of how the building developed to try to gain square footage and be as efficient as we can with the floor plan. So as you see from left to right, the building kind of became more efficient in a way, while providing more units per floor.
And again, what's important for you guys to understand is these are drawings that we are doing as this project is developing, not different from what you guys are doing. All right. So it's the same kind of loose sketch, yield, understanding how rooms are related to each other. You'll get more into that over the next couple of weeks, but loose sketch ideas about how these buildings come together.
So once we went through the zoning analysis in our office, we were able to kind of devise a plan as to what was the allowable buildable square footage, and we try to meet that with our square footage of the proposed design. As you can see to the right, every square inch was tried to use. Those are space planning diagrams, sketches for the units. To the left is our unit matrix. As you can see, the allowable square footage and our proposed square footage as close as we could get it.
We didn't get fired, by the way, folks in our class. Left 3,000 square feet on the table.
So in the same way, we study the 3D mass and the elevations. The massing steps back along the alley to allow light to reach the lower units, as you can see here, and as you can start to see in some of these diagrams as we developed the overall design. As well as the elevation. So this is the main elevation. The building, when we designed it, we were aware that there was a building that will go up next, right abut it. And there is a building that's proposed across the side alley as well. So part of the conversation in our design process was the fact that that elevation to the side was going to get covered. This is the main facade along L Street. The street front composition emphasizes the verticality of such a narrow site, including its signature kind of vertical fin, as well as the corner kind of jewel box condition in silver. At the ground floor, the double height composition, or the double height lobby lounge visually connects residents back to the street. So again, that connectivity between the community that you're creating and the existing context that's there. The ground floor houses things like the loading dock, mailroom, and kind of a lounge space, as well as the entry into the underground parking, which is 3 levels down. This project was being constructed during COVID, so the amenities were flexible to shift. An example of that is added storage for packages, since during COVID and post-COVID, there seems to be a lot more of that happening. So there's constantly a shift happening between what's happening in the real world and how we're designing, and sometimes it's a quick turnaround, especially during COVID. The residential units, over half of them have balconies, which was important for gathering. This allows light to fill the units. Again, a very tight site and supposed to be covered on 3 sides, even though there's an alley. It also provides significant views back into the city, across to the Anacostia River, as well as the Washington Monument. And then penthouse amenities. the design kind of placed a premium on gathering spaces as well in the private side with the units as well as in the public side to all the residents in the building. There are 2 roof terraces surrounded by an intensive green roof, which we talked a little bit about sustainability, but most of our projects follow the DC Green Building Code, which is kind of gold standard within sustainability in the cities right now.
So the last project is actually, again, this was the result of a design competition with a developer. In Baltimore, it's in a pretty tough neighborhood. So it's called Center West, and it's along Route 40, just kind of north and east of the UMBC Medical College campus. Poe Homes is a large neighborhood that's immediately to the east of this site, and you can see these kind of rows of affordable housing that are HUD financed housing. They're all being torn down because it's what's the show? You know, the Wire. Yes, and it was shot in this neighborhood. So you see Route 40 is kind of a ditch that has a highway in it, doesn't go very far, and periodically crossed. Our original concept design competition was for the site that is kind of colored orange on there adjacent to Route 40 and with some existing row houses. The only thing on there that had to be saved were some alley houses that were in the middle of one of the blocks. And the rest of it was available to be torn down. So on the wall on the left-hand side is the outcome of our study. It's $100,000, a lot of money put into winning this design competition for this project.
So like David mentioned, it's 2 blocks out of a bigger PUD that was being redeveloped in the area. Our initial approach was to redevelop this larger block to the north of 2 city blocks with an alley kind of crossing it. There were 2 buildings that were already built as part of that larger PUD. This is the neighborhood of Poppleton in West Baltimore. That includes the Poe Homes to the east, which has Edgar Allan Poe's house. As we moved through the process and we developed the initial kind of feasibility study, the opportunity for this other block here came about. We called it Block J. Now it's known as 999 West Saratoga, which is the building that you initially saw. Again, these are examples of diagrams that we do in the office. This is a transit analysis diagram. This was the initial feasibility study that we did. These are the existing buildings. And then this is what became the project 999 West Saratoga. More examples. So within the PUD, new heights were being developed, which affected both the initial site and 999 West Saratoga. This is an example of the zoning analysis that we did, implementing the new rules that superseded what the city zoning said under the PUD guidelines. So moving towards 999 West Saratoga, which is this corner building with the 2 buildings to the south of it that were already built, there was a height that was being proposed with an additional increase that was allowed. The site is exposed on all 4 sides as it has 3 street fronts and a sort of alley that had to be kept that, as you'll see, became a muse or park. So in developing and trying to meet the client's needs, we did our initial studies to try to meet the client's unit count requirements, parking requirements, etc. This we saw that required us to excavate to allow for more parking underground. It also made units that were smaller along a central courtyard. But in talking with our partners in Baltimore, PIKL Studios, they brought up their expertise in Baltimore is bigger units. And so we had to pivot a little to meet the kind of market expectations of Baltimore. By the same time, meeting the client's budget. And so not excavating allowed us to meet that budget. The building shifted from a centralized courtyard to having two external courts or courtyards and became this kind of IE-shaped building with the parking fitting inside the building kind of at its core in the first two floors. It also allowed us to generate street-facing units along all sides, including some two-story masonettes. Again, these are the two existing buildings that were already built when we came to the project. And this is our building, our site, which became 999 West Saratoga. This project also went through a design phase approval process with the city of Baltimore. So all the images that you're seeing were images that we generated for those presentations. The building height was generated in Baltimore. It's generated from where the address is or where the main entrance is, which in our case is the high point of our site. In Baltimore, also, the parapet is part of your building height unless it's only used for mechanical enclosure. So dealing with that and trying to get, again, try to meet the client's expectations in terms of unit counts was a challenge, which ended up requiring us to kind of lower the front main entrance lobby space a step down. To the south of the building is that kind of pocket park muse that is lined with masonettes, as well as here you see some of those masonettes. The idea behind it is to serve as a private kind of park for the residents that during the day can open to the larger community. And then eventually the intent is for those kind of gates to go away, and this becomes kind of a more cohesive, as the area is being redeveloped, kind of connection between all the buildings of the PUD.
It's a half wire site. So trends, we just thought we'd share a few trends with you guys. This is what's happening according to Multifamily Executive and other current things that are happening amongst our clients' demands for amenity spaces predominantly. So go ahead and walk through them. So
sustainability is a trend, but it's also a requirement, especially in DC. I always say all our projects could be LEED if the client pays for it. They meet the basic requirements for most accredited programs. They don't necessarily have it, but they could if they would. Adaptive reuse, David mentioned our office to residential conversion, as well as our church to residential conversions. I think post-COVID, that kind of broke the scale again and spiked with the office buildings kind of being emptied out. Versatility, so multi-purpose rooms, multi-purpose furniture, technology integration, community-centric spaces, especially in our affordable projects, we see a lot of. Creative workspace, kind of along with that flexibility space. Again, all of these post-COVID have spiked, and there is a need and a want for these spaces to exist, especially with with most offices having at least 2 days virtual. Safety considerations with finishes and whatnot. Curb appeal, obviously, there's a trend to kind of look like a hotel, feel like a hotel, have amenities that carry that language through. Food and package deliveries, I mentioned that with Kennedy on L a bit. And then top tier amenities, on-site amenities, so that essentially micro communities within the buildings.
This is it more important and the further out you go from center city, because, in the center city, it's all there, right? The amenity is built into the fabric of the city. If you're on the edge, so if you're in an exurb, it's not quite urban, which Park and Ford and the George are not. They're on the edges of more developed areas. They make their own community there. So they don't have retail, but they do have a full amenity package in there. What we're doing on our site and for 302 is more urban. So we have immediate access to lots of retail, lots of open space and amenity stuff. So
on the construction side, we're seeing timber as a kind of trend.
Wave of the future for the East Coast, not here yet.
Yeah, and truly in the multifamily kind of realm, it's far, far away. We thought we would end with some of our kind of multifamily design guides. These are kind of typical rule of thumb that we carry through. Doesn't mean that they're kind of the Bible. But typical building widths with multifamily and a double loaded corridor wants to be 60 to 70 feet. Single loaded 30 to 40. Core dimensions for most of our projects, start with a 10 by 20 stair. It might shrink. Stair widths, 44 is kind of standard. If you have less than 50 occupants in your building, you can go down to 36. That's a clear dimension. Double elevators with one usually being bigger than the other. We were talking today in studio. Most buildings nowadays don't carry a traditional freight elevator. They just have one that's slightly bigger. In DC, you're required to have one elevator that fits a stretcher for ambulance. Corridor width, 5 feet minimum. 6 feet is always good. And we always suggest a kind of relief in front of the elevator of about 8 foot to 9 foot.
Who knows why? Come on, I told some people in our class. So you think it's for spatial reasons, like architecture and making space? It's for getting couches and beds in and out of elevators because you have to swing them out. So if you're trying to swing that out into a 5 foot corridor, you can't make it work. So, there's actually a practical reason why we're able to actually make space and do something required gives us an aesthetic advantage.
Habitable spaces. I won't go into too much detail for this. You can read it for yourself with some small, medium, large dimensions for bedroom sizes, overall living space widths, and some bathroom dimensions. Most of our bathrooms would follow the accessibility code. In multifamily, they would be either type A or type B, type A being the more accessible. Minimum window requirements. In DC, you're allowed to have what we call a buried bedroom by providing 8% of the square footage of that space. Am I reading that correctly? Yeah.
For light.
Or 1/10 of the floor area or 25 square feet. So as you can see in the image, that's a bedroom in there that doesn't have direct access to the outside, but to the back of that person taking the photo, there's a window that provides light into that room. So for those tighter buildings like the Kennedy on L, we were able to achieve a 1 bedroom. The client's happier. They charge more for that instead of a studio. and then it's completely kosher by the code. Target square footage for residential units, for market rate, affordable housing. As you can see, they're a bit more family oriented. Also student housing, as you heard us talk about Midtown Row, student housing focused. It was more about the bed counts than the bedroom counts. So the bedroom to bathroom ratio is a little bit more in line, more even than some of the other. And that's it.
Questions? Thanks for staying awake at 5 o'clock. Yep. Any questions? Oh, it's Doug. We're in trouble now. Hi,
Yeah,
Doug.
could you mentioned you mentioned two things about tectonics, about the technology of construction. One, a project where you were looking at offsite increasing the amount of offsite or prefabricated construction, and then you made a allusion to mass timber. Could you talk about the rules about construction, about concrete podium, stick built above? At what point do you go to not stick built? And what your perception of the market with regards to mass timber, because that deals with both offsite prefabrication, reduces on-site construction, speed of erection, but there's other cost issues and familiarity in our market as opposed to some other places in the world where it's already taken hold.
So I'll say that's two questions. The first one, yeah, at least, but we deal with affordable housing a lot, and it's probably a third of what we do. Most of it these days is rehab. We do the Alien Place just complete, One Hawaii just finished also. Our new builds. We're doing a lot of work for Jubilee Housing that is rehab. I think we have seven or eight buildings with them that are rehabs of existing projects. My personal opinion is that's a better way to go. It should be less expensive to produce affordable housing using that model. And we have another large one down near the RFK Stadium site, Meadow Greens, that's underway. So for affordable housing and market rate housing, you can do a podium, okay, that is concrete, and build it out and then post up on top of it with wood frame or metal stick construction. So wood frame construction, there are two heights. You can do your podium as a single story concrete podium above grade. If you have below grade parking, that's going to be type 1 construction as well. Type 1 construction, cast in place concrete, the most expensive construction type. All right. So the most expensive. And so you do a floor up, a floor down. You can actually do 2 floors up. Okay. And then go with wood frame construction on top of that.
You gain a story.
So
in the screen, Midtown here, we call it 4 over 1. Whereas 99 over West Saratoga is 5 over 2. So this second story, even though it doesn't read as part of the podium, is part of the podium. So the concrete stops there and then it's wood above.
Yep.
That's a fire rating conversation.
Yep, it's a building code issue. So you can do 4 stories and it's a lower fire classification, and sprinklers and a lot of other things. The wiring, et cetera, is less robust and less costly. You can do 5 stories and you have to do higher ratings on things like the exterior walls and the type of You have to use Romex cable instead of, plastic coated wiring. So, there are various things and various things increase the higher you go. You have to provide more safety. So, we are, so 5/2 is a 7-story building. That's the same size buildings that we've made a universal decision in terms of the zoning on our metro site that it can be a 90-foot building. So that you're getting very close to being a 90-foot building if you're doing a 2-story podium with wood frame construction above it. If you want to go one step further and not do concrete type 1 construction all the way up, you can do 7-on-2. So the 7 is Infinity is the tray is a actual manufacturer, but it's a metal floor deck and metal studs, and you can do 7 floors of that on top of 2. You're at a 9-story building that's higher than we can build on the zoning category for our site. So that's a less expensive way than doing type 1 construction. Type 2 is generally steel, and in DC you don't see much steel because the depth of the structure is greater. So type 1 construction, your slab depths, oftentimes using flat plate slabs, are 8 inches-ish. You may have dropped heads or other things, but that's about the depth of the slab. When you're doing the B deck or infinity type system, the slab depth is 6 inches, and then you may have some structure that you have to work with, but you get an extra 3 inches. Doesn't sound like much, except when you're working to a very specific height limit, every inch matters. So the volume that you get in the unit matters. So that, these days for market rate apartment units, we want a 9-foot ceiling. So we can cheat and go down to 8, 9, 8, 8, 8, 9, call it a 9-foot ceiling. But at the end of the day, you're looking for as much volume as you can get. So in affordable housing, we can do an 8-foot ceiling. So and it might be 7, 11.5 or something, but they're working with our coursing on the outside of the wall and that's outside of the building. But at the end of the day, I can get more height, more stories, or less exterior skin for the volume of the unit when I'm doing affordable housing. So all of those things, it's a complicated equation that you have to be thinking about. So then the timber question, I've never done a timber building, so I can't speak to it. Perkins and Will and Hickok Cole have done timber buildings in DC. Perkins and Will did a library in Southwest, I think it is. Is it Southwest? Yeah. And a really nice building. It was a design build project, and the interior is very strong, I think. Hickok Cole added to a building I did a long time ago at 80 M Street, right near our 37th, our Kennedy on L. And they added 2 stories of timber on top of that. And they did it because it's lightweight structure. It didn't overburden the lower levels, and makes for an interesting interior. So there are a lot of pluses to it from an aesthetic standpoint. From a cost standpoint, on the East Coast, where's the timber coming from? It's coming from the West Coast, yeah. Or Europe. Okay. Not so much here. We're doing, we use something called CLT, cross-laminated timber, when we're doing our 5-story structures, because the compression that happens it's not in the stud, it's in the plate. So we use that because it's much stronger. And if you get a 1/2 inch of compression times 9 stories, that's 4.5 inches of compression. That's a pretty bad thing, right? So if you're controlling that, it's a much better thing. So we use some of the technology on our stick-built 5-story stick-built projects, but it hasn't the full cross-laminated timber and timber construction hasn't really made its way east yet because we don't have the natural material here. We also I don't think we have the expertise. So the workers who did the Perkins and Will job lived in DC. They worked in either, I think it was Northern California, Canadian, right? And so they came down. Do I think it's going to change? I believe it will because it is good technology, but I don't think it's made its way. It's going to be, I will be retired by the time it makes it here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it's also related to the offsite construction and the cartridge and grand block construction.
Yep.
And you alluded to that where there's financing issues as much as construction technology.
Yep. So the prefabricated stuff, everybody's like, oh, this is the answer to affordable housing. Not so much. I'm not a full believer in shipping a fully formed unit. So, and that's what we were doing. It's like shipping Airstream trailers or mobile homes. So, you make the mobile home, you put it on a truck and you ship it, and then you lift it up and you put it in place. Well, that's great, except I have to build the floor, I build the unit, and I build a ceiling. And that ceiling has to be structurally sound because I got to lift it up from there. All right. And the finishes I put inside can't crack. It has to be structurally rigid. So I now have that. The next unit above has a floor, the occupied space, and the ceiling. So I built an extra layer of vertical surface and an extra layer of structure that's not free. When I'm doing the sidewalls, I'm putting a sidewall and a sidewall that are structural, and they have to withstand all the kind of movement requirements. And then I'm setting that down and I'm building another one. So now I have got a structural wall and a structural wall next to each other. So I've made the unit bigger. So, and they're building them in 12 to 13 foot widths so they can be shipped. So in a single unit that was 25 feet wide, I now have either eaten space out of the interior of the unit or made my building longer. So it ain't free. And that stuff is built off-site before it can be used, before the client, they have to pay for it ahead of time. And then it just sits there until they're ready to lift it up and put it on site. I think that they've gotten through their coordination issues. There are systems connection issues that have to happen, all those kinds of things. I think they've tackled most of those pretty effectively, but it's an expensive way to do it. And I'm shipping air. So I'm now shipping a box that's empty. So I like the IKEA approach to prefabrication, which is to build panels and ship the panels. So it's flat box stuff. It's much more efficient from a shipping standpoint. You don't get the level of finish that you do or quality control in a factory environment, but you do get some better efficiencies in terms of panelization. That I think that's our short-term future, and most of our projects are going that way.
I know you've worked at both a large scale firm, and people probably have to go, but both a large firm, previous to your firm,
Microphone.
and a smaller scale firm. One thing we've been talking about in our studio is the level of experience that you might get in a different scale firm.
Yep.
So I wonder if you might speak to the students in your experience about the differences, and maybe to keep it short, like what are the two best things about a smaller scale firm like ours and yours versus the two worst versus the two best and two worst in a plus 200 person firm, if you could try and.
Yeah. So I'm in the larger firm. It was a multidisciplinary firm. And we had at our peak, 250 people in 4 offices. And we had 50 architects in DC, and we had, 25 in San Francisco, and studios in 2 other offices. So the larger firms tend to want to have specialists in, you, I believe, kind of follow a path, and you're either a designer or a technician or an administrator or a manager or a marketer. So, you begin to develop a much sort of tighter set of skills in a larger firm. And then overlay that, the larger firms tend to do larger, more complicated buildings. So they may have a medical practice, and they may have a life sciences and technology practice, and they may have some other sort of office building practice and a civic practice. So you may end up in one of those silos, and you may end up with a specialty within that silo. So you're a siloized architect at that point. The smaller firms like ours, and I would say firms up to 40 to 50 people, can cross-pollinate. So in David's studio and our studio, we do a variety of project types. Everybody in our studio works on whatever project type wherever they're needed. So Eduardo, you heard about his bio. He's worked on a wide range of stuff. In a larger firm, he may have been more, siloed, only doing restoration work or only doing new builds of type 1 construction or something. So, again, you get in a smaller firm, you get a broader range of things, and we're a cradle to cradle firm like you are. So we start marketing a project. Eduardo's on marketing teams with myself, Jack, John, Bill, so and our marketing lead. So they're on marketing teams, and they're help putting the proposal together. They're going to the interview. They are integral to us winning the work. They know the work before it's won, and then they're involved in the design, development, documentation, and construction administration. And that's a more rich experience, I think, for young architects, and something I've patterned my own practice on, even at larger firms, making sure that we were cradle to cradle. Better design control. Doug, what do you think? I mean, you worked at RTKL.
It was a good, and it's really good. It's great. Yeah, the world is pushing everybody towards specialty. I believe that there's as I think you do. Now you're asking me questions?
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good to be an expert. I know everything there is about this one thing, but there's also an advantage to know a lot about a little about a lot of things. Cross-fertilization between project types and task types leads to invention, I think. So there's an argument to be made both ways.
And at the end of the day, I do all these things, and I like the mind challenge of it. So the tallest building in the region is Capital One's headquarters. I was designing Capital One's headquarters at the same time with a great team. So, it wasn't me alone. There's a lot of people. But I was also working with one person on the Hazel River cabin. So 1.8 million square feet of total construction versus 2,400 square feet of a log cabin. That was being 1696 log cabin that was being reconstructed. So crafted. So really wonderful project. So, I personally like that. I would never be able to do that in a large firm.
David, Eduardo, thank you so much. Mr. Ron, are there any other questions or comments?
We're in studio, so you guys are always welcome to come by. We have a library going in the studio with some, a variety of materials and Miss Maya's desk. It's Maya's library. So, in the center of our studio down there, we're right over here on the west side in the back.
Very handsome work, very useful rules of thumb. Wonderful to hear about the inner workings of your office, because I think you kind of see that happening a bit in the studio setting. And it is intentional on our parts that the way we work in a studio in the academy is foreshadows the way you're going to work in a professional office. So wonderful talk. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. You didn't go to sleep. Maya went to sleep, though. Maya went to sleep. Yep.